So, Bill, you had 300 people show up at Avalon Manor on Monday.
Yeah.
You've got to be heartened over the notion of that many people showing up to support a public policy idea like expanding the South Shore.
Yeah, you know, it's a great feeling for a lot of reasons. I mean, one is the sheer number of the people out there. Two is, you know, we've been doing this for a long time trying to push the initiative, so I think that represents kind of a tipping point. But also, you know, it was nice to have younger people come out. That, you know, that who was there was important as well, and that's different than we've seen before. And I think it's encouraging to see people who really get this, or they're working in Chicago and think that this is a great improvement.
The idea of expanding the South Shore into Munster and down into Dyer, this has been around for like 25 years. What makes now different than any time up until now?
Yeah, you know, I think it's like a lot of things. I mean, everything has its time. And it takes a while to push progressive ideas forward and for people to get their arms around them. And, you know, the money has to be there as well. So one of those things where the stars are aligned this time, all of the parts seem to be falling into place. And I think also, you know, we've had a lot of changes in our economy in Northwest Indiana, and people are starting to recognize that, you know, while, let's say there's 5,600 riders projected to be on this new line and $147 million annually in new salaries. That's like having a new steel mill, only it's better. Because you're getting the diversity of opportunity in one of the biggest markets in the world in Chicago.
We had somebody on the radio today talking about asking the question, why subsidize Chicago? By expanding this commuter line, you're basically subsidizing jobs in Chicago when you could be doing that here in Northwest Indiana. Is that a fair argument?
Well, you know, I understand that perspective and where it comes from, but the cases that you can examine from around the country, like New Jersey or Northern Virginia to Washington, D.C., or any number of these areas where you have bi- or tri-state scenarios in a big urban center, the fact is, economically, you're going to benefit when you're outside the area because those, again, 147 million, 157 million a year in new salaries, people are going to spend that on housing here, groceries here, restaurants here, automobiles. It's going to create a tax base increase. So really, Chicago's probably getting the shorter end of the stick in terms of economic value with something like this.
But the notion of, if I'm not going to ride the South Shore on any sort of regular basis, why should any of my tax dollars be going to subsidize somebody else's trip to Chicago?
Sure. Well, and that's a fair question, and it's one that we probably don't talk enough about. But it absolutely has to do with a rising tide lifting all boats economically and otherwise. And so when people are more prosperous and they're making more money, you know, your taxes come down because there's a broader amount of investment. There's more resources to spend in your community, and everybody benefits from that. So this is about everybody, whether or not you ride the train. Everybody benefits from new money coming into your community.
There is kind of a controversy here, the notion of $4 million. It's right now, it's coming out of casino money for a tax credit. They're going to close that loophole. $4 million of that dollars could be earmarked now to the RDA to spend on the South Shore. You have mayors, including NERC, saying they would rather see that money go back to the local communities. Why should the RDA get that money?
Right, and again, you know, it's funny because I've been asked this question a few times lately, and I think people look for an answer that's a little bit more controversial, and I'm not trying to sidestep this at all, but I'll tell you the truth. Philosophically, I can understand where the communities are coming from. Now, the question for me becomes, is it better to be philosophically right, or is it better to get the job done in this case when people's jobs depend on it, their livelihoods depend on it, and we've tried so hard to get there? And so I think it's a case of, you know, not letting perfect get in the way of good. And so I think this is probably the best case scenario we were going to get, and we're going to apply the money properly. So I think that's really, you know, where our board is and where others that support this is, you know, not so much where the money comes from, but how we apply this that's going to make the difference.
Congressman Visklowski's talked about the next 3 weeks are like the most significant for this. What do you expect will happen in the next 3 weeks?
Well, the way this works financially is that we have to come up with about $16 million a year in order from local sources in order to build the train. Now that's matched dollar for dollar by the federal government. And just a quick point about that, talking about Illinois and Chicago benefiting. If we don't get this done, it's likely that the Illinois side would be able to achieve this sometime in the near future. And it's very unlikely that the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, would fund both. So there's federal dollars that we're already paying, and we're saying let's bring those back here and spend it on our side of the line on people having jobs here and the investment coming here as opposed to over there. In order to make the application for the federal government, we have to have the cash obligated in place before we go to the FTA. And that's why Congressman Visklosky has been pretty urgent about this. It's a national competition. There's timing with this stuff. And so we're saying, let's beat the competitors for once. Let's lead the nation on a national project for transit. Let's lead Indianapolis, and let's go out and get the job done.
So if we have a conversation in the next month, we're going to know one way or the other whether or
Right.
not we're going to move forward.
Yeah, and we're really close. The RDA is obligated $8 million of the 16 already. Some locals have stepped up. The $4 million that we get out of the new bill that we just talked about will be applied to operating. In order to make the application, we have to prove that we can operate the train for 5 years. So what's left is about $5.5 million to fill in, and there's new CEDAT money out there. And so what's really exciting about this, beyond just, just what it is obviously exciting. We have not created any new taxing mechanisms to get this done. This is about redirecting mechanisms that are already there. So, compared to what Indianapolis is doing or others are doing, we're doing this without new taxes.
All right. Well, Bill Hanna, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.